Yeah,
Okay, so now that our recording has
thank
started,
you.
yeah, of course. I'm just going to introduce our two amazing speakers for today, facilitators for today's workshop, which is the third in the series of writing book proposals. First is Dr. Pinky Hota, who is an associate professor of anthropology at Smith College. Her book, of which I'm a huge fan, The Violence of Recognition, Adivasi Indigeneity and Anti-Dalitness in India, was published by University of Pennsylvania Press in 2023. She's published her research in journals such as Modern Asian Studies, Anthropological Quarterly, and Political and Legal Anthropology Review. Thank you so much, Pinky, for doing this. Our second esteemed facilitator for today is Dr. Gaurav J. Pathania, who is an assistant professor of sociology and peace building at Eastern Mennonite University in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Gaurav has been a visiting scholar at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and the University of Southern California. His first book, The University as a Site of Resistance, again, a really amazing book, Identity and Student Politics, explores student resistance in higher education in India. Currently, his research focuses on the sociopolitical activism of the South Asian diaspora in the US and UK. Dr. Pathania serves as a deputy editor for South Asia Research, a journal published by SOAS University of London. Gaurav made his Hollywood debut in Ava DuVernay's film Origin, portraying Dr. Ambedkar as the architect of the Indian Constitution. Welcome, Gaurav, and thank you so much. So I'll turn it over to you two now.
Gaurav, would you like to go first?
Sorry, I just want to say if folks have questions, just you can start putting it in we don't have a question and answer box, so just put it in chat and we will get to those questions at the end, or however you two like to do.
Yeah.
Gaurav, would you like to get us started?
Pinky, I think you can start. Yeah, I think you have recent. Your book is so recent, so I think you should start.
Just a minute. Just a small announcement. Please, all the participants, please mute your microphone, please. Yeah, Pinky, please. Thank you.
I will start by, I think I want to approach this process with a lot of honesty and demystification because I think one of the biggest ways that elitism and privilege is reproduced in the academy is through a kind of, we talk about successes but not failures. We talk about we don't talk about the book process as a really a kind of struggle to land things, and I want to make sure that I emphasize that um, this is a process of many failures, errors, and trying to find your footing and find your way. And I think seeking mentorship and not hiding from, that this is somehow the idea that books are somehow perfectly made from the get-go and they just come out in that way, and that's not how it is. And I think in academia, it's easy to feel intimidated and kind of feel like I can never replicate what somebody else has done. I can, and being watching other people's sort of success and feeling like that is never going to be accessible and approachable. And my effort today will be to just break down my own path as with even with enormous caste privilege, and to show that this is really a process of um, yes, many lapses, and to understand that there is no shame in that, and to find the right kind of guidance, the right kind of allies, and the right kind of mentorship to get to the stage of making a book. A book is really a community effort in some ways, and we it comes across as an individual achievement, but a lot goes into the making of it, and I want to kind of highlight that as I present today. But I think I want to start with sort of, because today we are devoting our time to talking about the elements of a book proposal. For me, the process began with clarifying the intent of the project. When I started doing this work in India, there wasn't very many good models for how to work on caste as a caste privileged person. You know, for those of you who don't know my work, I should say that I worked with the RSS and the VHP. I had actually gone in to ask the RSS and the VHP about how they were dealing with caste in their outreach, and they, upon finding out that I was Oriya, they redirected me to Orissa, which is where I did my work. No doubt, my access to the RSS and the VHP was secured by the fact that I have a Brahmin last name, and that they assumed that I would not be very critical of what they were doing on the ground. And so when I went into the field and I was seeing a very kind of hostile situation emerge between Adivasis and Dalits, there wasn't a readily available vocabulary, that kind of showed the distinct problems that each group was facing in caste society. Because, until then, the paradigm of subaltern studies had always treated them as somehow co-eval and equal in every way, as two minority formations. And I didn't know and didn't want to replicate this kind of language about caste, which was just kind of how going and documenting the groups. Caste is a kind of inert object of a social fact, a natural kind of aspect of Indian society. I wanted to show that caste was a ongoing system of domination, and caste in a Brahminical society was serving as the continuities between the kind of deeply held ways in which these beliefs have become institutionalized by the state and in the law, and its continuities with right-wing politics, because all the work that had been done so far on right-wing politics in India sort of engaged in this, criticism of right-wing politics as a kind of novel thing, as a terrible thing, as a bad thing, without acknowledging that its roots lay in Brahminical caste society and caste anxieties, and they were in a continuum. You know what I'm trying to say? Just like whiteness and the current fascist moment are in a continuum, if that makes sense. So it was very important for me that the way that the work was written up was not just an inert documentation of caste, but conveyed that my intent to make this an anti-caste text and to indict a larger Indian social framework, and as it is institutionalized by the state and the law, before, and not just the right-wing politics in sort of a kind of vacuum and in a kind of sequestered bubble. The second thing that I was very conscious of, and this one I really, what does it mean for somebody with obviously enormous privilege that such as me to do this work, and how do I wanted to give due credit to Dalit studies. I wanted to make sure that we understood that at a time when nobody else was willing to name caste and talk about caste, and was engaging in a kind of erasure of caste, it is from the Dalit vantage point and Dalit studies that the conversation was held up even when nobody was paying attention for so long. So I wanted to make sure that I was also writing things in a way that gave credit. It didn't make it seem like I was doing this work newly or claiming that I was somehow inventing a new vocabulary entirely. I wanted to acknowledge the debt to Dalit studies and to the vocabulary that they had provided, in order to understand caste as a kind of palpable living category that continues to take on different shapes and forms in Indian society. And then my third real intent was to present religion and religious politics in conversation with political economy, because to create a kind of language for caste capitalism, because it felt like a lot of the work that had focused on caste or on religious politics was totally kind of divorced from questions of economic exploitation and economic domination. And I wanted to bring that in whatever if in whatever way I could say that was my contribution, was to kind of make that language meet of caste, right-wing politics, and political economy. And so my effort was then to kind of show how the continuities show a kind of deep historical investigation of how indigeneity actually became crucial in caste society as a way of deciding who gets to live on land, who gets to, and how religion became a very key modality of racialization, the differential racialization and casteism that re-engineered relations between Adivasis and Dalits in this area completely. And then how that became adopted into the law, and how that becomes sort of taken up within Hindutva. So for me, a huge part of the book was sort of clarifying the heart and the ethics of the project and what it must do. And that took a while, because as I was saying, I want to make clear the project was not easy to land. When I sent out pieces from this project earlier, they were met with years of rejection and failure. So I wanted to make it. It took me a long time to be able to clarify those ethics and say, I mean, these are the things I want to do, and I want this to somehow become very clear in the book proposal and then subsequently the book. The main thing is that um, this is, and in the journal publishing stage and sending things out to journals, you're still talking, journals put out research, they're publishing to sort of insider debates within the field. The book is really, for the first time, you're encountering the book is a commodity. It's a thing that is bought and sold, not in the same way that a journal article is. So ultimately, because the book is going to be bought and sold by presses, you have to locate it in a marketplace of books which are comparable. So you have to say, how does it compare with other books that have addressed similar issues? And books that are coming out sort of generationally in the same kind of cohort as your books. And what does it add? Does it distinguish itself from these other books that are coming out, so that the presses can immediately identify what is singular about this book, what is its contribution, and why they should take that book over three other books that are probably landing on their desk, which are talking about similar issues. And in order to do so one step is sort of reading comparable books in your field, in your discipline, and seeing and being really kind of clear-eyed about what your book is able to do and not do compared to them. That's one major process. And then the second thing is, I would say, reading books from a press that you are aiming for and trying to establish a kind of style that each press, because each press, we know now that every press has a kind of distinct style of book that it tries to uh, publish. They may like your proposal and still not publish it because it's just not the style of their book. For instance, I had a conversation with Duke University Press, and my conversation with them was precisely because I know that Duke's holdings in uh, race are very strong, and because Duke published the Dalit Studies edited volume, so that I assumed that the editors would have some knowledge about these things that we were, how to bring these things together in a text. And I will say one of the more supportive conversations I had was with an editor from Duke who took an hour to sit down and discuss the project with me over phone. But ultimately, they didn't take the book. And this was because my book is historical. It does a kind of, like I said, a political economy analysis, looks at, kind of very nitty gritty things, which Duke books almost always kind of focus on aesthetic and affective kind of dimensions of politics, and are less sort of invested in historical grounded analyses. So ultimately, even though the conversation with them was helpful and they were supportive of a caste and race agenda, um, they didn't go with the book because the book didn't sit well with the other style of books that they go for. So it's very important, if you're trying to save yourself some heartache and some time, to identify what presses will actually be more amenable to the voice and the style that your book is adopting, and to learn to identify, like go through different presses and say, this press has this style, this press has this style, and have a very realistic kind of appraisal of where you can fit in that landscape. um I- then I will say this: getting to the proposal stage, when your material is rough, there is sort of three layers of and yeah, I like I said, when I started doing it, the vocabulary for caste and race studies and anti-caste work had not emerged and was not enshrined. It's not fully enshrined yet, but at least there is some kind of model now, thanks to the caste and race conversations advanced by Dalit intellectuals in the United States, the works of Bharat and others organizing caste and race conference at UMass, folks such as Gaurav sort of going around spreading the message in the US Academy, but it was not really available in that way at that time. So to get to the proposal stage, the question of, how do you shape your work? You shape your work by presenting that work to peers, sharing, being part of some, having a few writing groups of your own peers who will read your work carefully and with the least judgmental and most supportive eye, basically. And for me, that group was the Inter-Asia group of the five colleges, where South Asian scholars, but South Asian scholars who were more broadly exposed to um, race studies, racial accounts of racial capitalism, settler colonialism. So having those peer mentors read some of the work. And sometimes it's also very important to have disciplinary faculty mentors, by which I mean having people for instance, in anthropology, who are rooting for you, or who are trying to give you some advice about how to locate yourself in the discipline. I've been very less successful at that. I've not been able to do that very well. But where I did find encouragement was from interdisciplinary faculty mentors, people who saw that there was a larger conversation, about racial capitalism, about settler colonialism, from which India had been excluded forever. And I knew that I couldn't write a book on caste from my subject position and from my location. I couldn't assume and presume to write a book on caste which was, um, true to a kind of Ambedkarite analysis, or to a more classical Dalit analysis as it would be found in India. But I knew that one thing I could do is, through my work teaching at a predominantly white institution, uh, trying to teach racial capitalism, settler colonialism frameworks more broadly to them, I could write a book from India that could be taught alongside these accounts from elsewhere in the world. And so that finally, Adivasi groups and Dalit groups would get to have that conversation, a pan-global conversation, and they wouldn't have to do the work anew of saying, we have been in a framework of settler colonialism, we have been in a extractive sort of caste capitalist framework, and to provide some of that vocabulary through the book. And that's where the interdisciplinary faculty mentors, people from women and gender studies, people from um, you know race, primarily like Black studies, and indigenous studies, providing. And some of it was just me reading a lot of reading across, reading the work of Native political scientists, Glenn Coulthard, reading the work of Black Marxism, trying to figure out what had been done elsewhere in the world, and what could India contribute to those conversations. Um, and I think it's very clear from the non non non-Savarna and non-Brahminical perspective that life is not a meritocracy. It's a series of networks and connections, and uh, which was not clear to me, I have to say. Because um, we are taught uncritically. We as a Savarna group, and certainly Brahmins, are taught that it is a meritocracy, and where your ideas alone and your work alone should somehow reach people and should be seen as, but that was not clear to me. Please grow your network, reach out to people, talk to people. Don't sit afraid in a corner that nothing you have to say is valuable and important. It's only through, I think part of it is also learning to talk about failure in the academy and not feeling like you're alone in it, and not feeling like you are somehow failing while everybody else is succeeding. That's not true. And I think we as faculty members, whatever we can do to demystify that myth of a somehow elegant meritocracy that reproduces itself effortlessly, that's not how it happens. So through this process, I received, I should say, I received a rejection from every press that I reached out to. Every press, except for Penn. It wasn't like there were multiple contenders and then I picked Penn. It was the only press that said yes. And I had reached out to South Asia series, both at the University of Washington and at Stanford. I had reached out to Duke. I had reached out to University of Minnesota, which also does very good race and class kinds of analyses. Um, and ultimately, what helped at Penn was that the series editor Sharika Thiranagama herself had done work on Dalit groups in Kerala, India, and she understood the stakes of some of the work, and it was it was a kind of ethnography of political violence, and the book is an analysis of this kind of religious violence as caste violence. So she saw the value in that, and the acquisitions editor Jenny Tan, who is more broadly trained as a race scholar, also saw value in the book. So I want to make sure that I leave you with this, I hope, a kind of understanding that this is not a kind of seamless process. And I have some sections that go into the making of the proposal. Then, after all of this kind of pre-work has been done, the proposal should have a project description. And I would say start just like this is true of anthropology. I am other disciplines, history, sociology. Gaurav will be able to speak to sociology more. Shaista will be able to provide some input from the vantage point of like comparative ethnic studies. But like starting with, just as you would in anything else, starting with an engaging hook, a descriptive hook that gets people into the heart of what you are working on, and then developing the description from there. So having a strong project description, having a discussion of scholarly contexts, which is where you put the contributions of your book in conversation with the contributions of other books. And put, say my book does this, but it's in conversation with X, Y, and Z book, but my book is able to add this piece of the puzzle. And then talking about audiences, who are the audience, who do you imagine reading this book, who will be teaching with your book? Like I said, the book is a commodity, so the press wants to see that the book has a place in the world where it will be taught and it will be used. So identifying departments, classes where this book could be assigned and what kinds of audiences would it speak to. And then having a kind of anticipated timeline and length of the book. This is a very crucial thing. I wrongly received the advice from one of my mentors in grad school that you should never approach anybody early on before having an entire version of the book. Please do not do that. Approach folks as early as possible. And 2 chapters and a proposal is quite adequate to approach someone. Um, and I think what in this anticipated timeline and length of the book, you would then say, I will finish the entire manuscript by, don't wait to finish the entire manuscript and then approach. So in the anticipated timeline, you would say, I have these many chapters written, of which 2 I have presented to you. I have these many more to go, and I anticipate finishing them by this and sending it in for review at this time. And then the length of the book is also what you would mention in this space. And I should say that all the presses want shorter books. They don't want, and my book was longer by contemporary standards, because I would say the sweet spot right now for books is something like 185 pages. With, I mean, so I would say, like, because the book is a commodity, because printing takes money, because all of that, um, having a shorter book is now they don't necessarily want you to dive into multiple different theoretical diversions in the book or try to explain. They want a compelling narrative and a lot of the theory in the footnotes, if at all, and kind of move you through swiftly, and keep it at a shorter length. And then finally, you should have the chapter summaries, which is that, you lay out, this is where really the editors can see the arc of your book, the narrative arc of your book. So the introduction does this, the chapter 1 does this, chapter 2 does this, chapter 3 does this, and the narrative, you show the movement of the narrative over the chapters. And then you talk about your conclusion, and your conclusion is where you really again zoom out to the biggest uh, sort of scale, and how your book can be not just perhaps talk about South Asia, talk about caste, but talk about global systems of inequality, domination, reproduction of um, reproduction of racial capital, etc. So that's again your chance to sort of zoom out and show the biggest impact of your work might be. So I'll stop here, but I wanted to say, if I can be of any help to people and referring people to presses, please reach out to me, because oftentimes it helps if somebody else is introducing you to a press. Sometimes for first-time scholars, they don't, I mean, that certainly happened to me. I haven't told you the name of all the presses who never responded to me. I mean, University of Chicago Press, rejection, but some presses, no response whatsoever. So sometimes, rather than kind of cold contacting them, it's better to have somebody introduce them and then go and meet the people at your professional conference, where there are often these publishing press booths, and have a kind of face-to-face interaction with the editor. And I think it's only I did not have a face-to-face. This was in the COVID year, so there was no face-to-face interaction with Jenny Tan. But um, that is the ideal framework, that once they are able to put a face to your name, that is where um, the relationship, there's a possibility of it growing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pinky. That was so amazing. I also want to say, there are presses like University of California Press in Minnesota that now publish books that are 30,000 words in length. And I know somebody who's still got tenure on a 30,000 word book. So if you can make a case to your department, that can also count. And before we turn this over to Gaurav, I just want to say that Bharat has posted a link for feedback, which he just posted again. Please click on this and make sure to leave us feedback before you leave or right after you leave. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Gaurav. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Saista, and great to hear, Pinky. And you actually laid down a great foundation. I mean, you said everything. Actually, I don't need to even. I just will, expand some of the points that you make. And I think most of the. And thank you, Bharat, for again, inviting and hosting this. Uh, uh, I think few points that as Pinky was mentioning, like for example, she started with this idea of like how elitism the academia is. So we are entering by publishing, we are entering in that kind of elitist circle. So it actually comes with a lot of responsibilities, and she tried to lay out so many of those responsibilities that we should think of. So now just few points about that, and then I'll come to some other concrete uh, or the face struggle or the challenges that a writer can face in this process. So see, especially in the context of the marginalized section, the section we are dealing with. So we are dealing with through our caste studies and Adivasi studies, indigenous studies, we are dealing with people who have never been part of any text. Yeah? So, and we are there studying their life, and all we are doing is, if you think of, all we are doing is just documenting their life, you know, and that's what this documentation makes us privileged. So what makes us privileged is that how we hold so much power on the knowledge by writing the text and publishing it. That's all we do. But in this process, we forget so many of those things which Pinky was trying to highlight, and I would also do some of these things, which I actually say that you must have heard this term called epistemic justice. That how do you do epistemic justice? That is, so they are also part of that as episteme, but we are never considering those people in part of our knowledge system. So I'm actually I call myself more of a Stuart Hallian. I follow his approach more of a cultural theorist. The guy actually who was saying that university is a critical institution or it is nothing. And he's the only person in academia, in the entire world academia, who actually didn't have a PhD but end up establishing a center for culture and studies in and given a full professorship by the Open University in UK. So a very great example of like how you look at academia critically. But at the same time, what we are dealing with, as Pinky was mentioning, that we are dealing with this academic which is so centered on the idea of market. It's a capitalistic, it's a commodity. Publishing is a commodity. So how do you maintain this balance between, satisfying the market and also the career and your commitment to the community? And that's where the epistemic justice comes in. So it's kind of a uh, how the right to be recognized as a knowledgeable person within a framework of justice. And I think that's a challenge. So in that context, how, for example, caste, uh, the epistemic justice, which entails the dismantling of hegemonic knowledge structures that have historically marginalized these sections of Bahujan and all. Now, when I was saying is that how one of the challenges that I have faced and I have seen so many of the Dalit students or tribal students are facing, which is a very common uh, challenge, is the challenge of English language. Mm. And I am saying that don't be afraid of this. This is, I mean, because we have to do it, and we have to just gain that kind of, now there are so many tools to help us. But uh, I remember a Irish author, very famous novelist, James Joyce. He used to say, he said, writing in English is the most ingenious torture ever devised for sins committed in previous lives. You know, so it's not just us, like everyone is facing this challenge. So how to actually deal with it? That's what so we have to kind of be very persistent in doing it. And of course, we're writing our PhD thesis in English. So one has to overcome this challenge by taking help and all. Uh, and that's why, as Pinky was mentioning, that if you find a disciplinary mentoring, it's best. If you go interdisciplinary, or if you don't even find a faculty who can help, so find some postdoctoral scholar or any of your friend circle. But I think the one major thing to before you go to the publication, approach the press, uh, do a lot of peer review among your friend circles, and don't be shy or afraid of that. You have to trust your own friends and get more feedback as much as you can, and that is the best way to get on before, because otherwise, in peer review suddenly it might delay the whole process when peer review, then the reviewer give a lot of these comments. So uh, then the second thing, again, emphasizing on epistemic justice, the idea of epistemic justice, that Pinky was saying that there is a lot goes on in the making of a book, which it's not just the author, but there is so many. Now, let me give you an example. Again, like what I was mentioning, the Stuart Hall, the critical way to look at academia, and you would agree to that. Now, for example, I studied in JNU, so I know more of a Delhi context, and I have seen, if not hundreds, but several dozens of PhD theses in my time when I was there. And in this, I have not. So now like India's context. Uh, I have seen people working, both the, let's say husband, wife working in academia and uh, making good way, in their career and successfully defending their thesis, publishing book. If you think of that context in Delhi, Bombay, and the bigger cities, that how is our household is run, who is actually contributing to our household. I have in my lifetime have not seen any PhD thesis or any book that actually acknowledging the contribution of the maid who actually works in the household. And I got that insight after coming here, where we have to do all the work. We have to wash our dishes, we have to clean everything and all. And then I see how much time actually goes in just maintaining one household. But people living in Delhi, Bombay, and bigger cities in India have that luxury of having the labor. But I have not seen even all these, you take any top Marxist people and all these so-called liberals, I have not seen mentioning of any or thanking these people who are basically what are that like who talks about those who provide real physical labor to save your time for intellectual labor, which in the US we don't have that luxury, right? So this is what I'm saying, that is what one has to think when you are thinking of the epistemic justice with your academia. Now, coming to publishing, so Pinky has already mentioned that how you have to, focus on the audience, which audience you're addressing. So sometime book might have a larger audience depending on the theme, depending on the topic. You know, like say for example, caste is an open topic. People who are writing about Dalits, there are writings who also writing about upper caste, that gives a different market. So like, the caste overall market. When I was publishing my book has a larger audience because the time when I finished my thesis and I approached the publisher, uh, it was the Telangana formation, the separate Telangana. Now you see, it's a new topic, no one knew about it. So it actually it got quick marketing, and it also kind of publisher were very interesting. So in one way, like how the timing works with your publication, the market, the timing of the market, the timing of the topic, and all its relevance. So the minute you start thinking about publishing a book, you, as my mentor told me, he said you have to think also like a salesman, like what sells. So accordingly, sometimes you have to design your chapterization, your topic, especially your title and all. So what will sell? Because that's what the university press are also thinking, that how what will sell in beyond academia. It's not just limited to academia. Like what's your reach of your book, and so this is what I say, that timing is so important. And for example, the people who are writing about caste studies was not as popular it was not a popular theme for publication as it has been in last decade or so. You know, a publisher were not even very interested in this, but now everyone is interested in caste because of the way caste debate is going on. But it might not be the same way like in next 5 years or 10 years. But so you have to always think like how what are the themes that are new in the caste. For example, the caste discrimination has been the most studied theme, caste marginalized and all. So it's so much highly studied theme. So how much publisher can actually publish on that when you have the repeated theme? So always kind of come up with this, provide some new angle to the same theme, and that's what publisher look for. And so what are the other issues? Yeah. So sometimes the the challenge what you say that how the you do the peer review and how you revise things, uh, also as Pinky was mentioning, that try to expand your scholarly network. Now, for example, this kind of platform which Bharat started with this Bahujan scholar. So I think the I and he started this mentorship workshop, mentoring workshops. This is really helping. People are connecting, people are learning the ways to, and like these kind of workshops, and you saw some of the links shared by in this chat box. There are so many avenues. I think one has to like just be really into going these, that how well we can understand what is going on. So look at your market, like what is going on, what is being published globally. Hmm? So all these themes that I think it's like these are very common themes that what we are studying in social science. But what is being studied? And another thing, actually, when you approach a publisher, and I think Pinky would agree with me that when you submit your PhD thesis, one of the things that publisher look for, that is this author aware of the peer review process. So that's why they want to know whether you have published earlier in any journal articles and all. And if you publish one article in a very good high quality journal, that is kind of a good signal for your book acceptance as well. They want to make sure, because peer review, or sorry, the book review process is sometimes it's very tedious. It goes for a long time, and publisher want to make sure that that author understands this. And I have seen many times author gets overwhelmed with all these reviewers' response because it might take long time. As Pinky was saying, they sometimes it extends so long that you feel frustrated, and then you are at that stage of your career where you want things in a year or two, like so quickly. So I think in the second last year of your PhD or the final year, make sure you have one solid article or a book chapter or anywhere that goes through proper peer review. And that's one way to approach the publisher. And the other way, I think, I'm not sure. I mean, I was not told, but I think Pinky can add to that. Uh, can you submit a book proposal to so many people, to so many presses at the same time? I'm not sure about that. In my time, I think it was not the practice. And
Only
also,
one at a time.
yeah,
Only
one
one.
at a time. Yeah. So I think it's still, because somewhere I heard someone was saying, he said, no, you can do it now and all. But I think it ethically, it's not a good practice, because what I notice in case studies, especially, the reviewers are same. And it happened to me once that I received two proposal from two different presses of the same author. So it did happen. So it means that then there is ethical violation that we have to really take care of that. And the yes, I think all other thing is like every university press has a different kind of their templates, like how much they want. So one thing you have to always ask yourself every day as you're finalizing your topic, that why am I writing this book, and what's the relevance now, and why now, and that's why you have to do a great literature review, and that helps you building your rational and your argument. And so literature review, again, when you I'm saying that when you do good peer review through your friends and all, you will get a very good hold of literature review, and that helps a lot. Um, and what else? The Yeah, and as you go through the peer review process, you actually keep until, because there will be point come when publisher will say that you can't add anything else, just whatever we have. So make sure that you do a thorough research, and don't keep studying the most recent research in your area. Don't leave out, because I see there are so many articles which are not read by the authors, which are very recent in their area. So that's why, if you think that you are not able to download any article which is just latest article in your area, ask your friends in other countries or wherever. Now you have network, ask us, we can download and give it to you. But do mention these latest, most recent articles, most recent arguments in your book. And that way it makes it more relevant, that yes, you are, and the author is very well aware of. I have seen proposal where people are in 2023 4 people are submitting a proposal and they're mentioning the argument which is done in 2005. And that's a clear rejection, that you don't, actually author is not fully aware. So that's why peer review is important. That's why show to few friends, get their suggestion from all over wherever you have friends. So I think I would love to have your thoughts and on, I think, more particular questions, topic wise and all. So I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. I was just wondering, before we open it up to the audience, I was just wondering if either of you are able to maybe do a screen share with your own book proposal that you can just go through the parts. I think that would be very helpful for folks. The other thing I also wanted to say to the audience is get Laura Portwood's How to Write a Book Proposal. I'm going to put in the link, but I advertise that book without getting paid every single workshop, because it has been one of the best books, at least for humanities and social science people. So I don't know if any of you have anything that you can share on your screens, and maybe also talk about what are the sorts of negotiations that you have to make as authors with your editors, because it's like a dissertation. You have negotiations with your supervisor, in terms of title, in terms of organizing of ideas, in terms of sizing a chapter, for example. Anything that either of you can share, that'll be great. Thanks.
I wanted to say, actually, because I had held on to the book for so long and completed the entire thing before sending it to people, there wasn't a lot of room for movement, because I had really made sure the um, arc of the chapters, everything was laid out just so. There wasn't, I have to say, there wasn't a lot of input from the editor or from the reviewers about dramatic major changes to the book. The suggestions they had were all sort of like clarifications, more details of certain things. So I guess one one upside of holding on to the book too long and just going on polishing it is that it can cut down some of those more difficult like negotiations. There are, I mean, the expectation is that you would take editorial input to really re-engineer a book, and you should allow for time for that, and there's no harm in that either. That's supposed to be part of the review process, a peer review process. In my case, that was not, so I don't have that much experience about how to negotiate on those. But Gaurav will have, perhaps will be able to say something to that. I wanted to talk about this question. Thank you, Gaurav, for bringing up, yes, exactly this question of epistemic justice, which I was talking about, having an anti-caste ethics, trying to really, so what does epistemic, I think sometimes the question of epistemic justice can look feel very intimidating, because it feels like are you have to do, in my case it felt like I have to do right to make up for being part of a history that is so violent. But there was no existing vocabulary to do that. And I just genuinely, I wanted, I think sometimes that epistemic justice can be like, um if can I be useful to someone? Can I be you can even despite my position and whatever all the privileges, can this book become useful to the minority groups themselves to make a case for something? And I think that's the version of epistemic justice that seems at least doable within our small um, framework and just as a small gesture that we can offer. And sometimes sometimes that's the starting point of what you can do to just provide a vocabulary where, let's say, somebody like Shaista reads the book and understands that Adivasi groups are the most economically marginalized in India and have had the least economic mobility in the Indian state and find the least representation in consequently in the Indian Academy and the US Academy.
Right, right, right. Yeah. No, and also kind of the goal is that are we really representing their voice in our work, you know? So, but also maintaining the academic credibility as well. So I think, and there are good examples of like there's so many, authors or people who have guided us. Their work has been really powerful. Like for example, people like Gail Longwet and these kind of work, they're very pioneering work that how you be with that community and never leave that in one way, that you keep going back and forth to help them and understand. That's how kind of it's a long commitment.
Long
you know
commit.
but generally what happens that we do, it seems like we behave in a very kind of a transactional way.
Extractive
Right.
way.
It's very
Extractive way.
transactional.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we do it, you do it, this one, and like give and take. So that's what academia is more on. So there is no kind of a solid grounding, building solidarity with the community and all. And I see that every time. Like even I'm always researching, doing work, and it's challenging in the sense because we have a limited time. And solidarity building is it's a lifetime process. So how actually we also make best use of that time and publish and also kind of do that. So that comes with a deeper commitment to these issues of marginality. So I think, yeah, I mean, you already said that.
I used to be plagued by these issues. I think full 5 years, I think I just was wondering, I get to leave the field. People live with the violence. And, how do I present this material in a way that is sensitive and humane? And, ultimately, the book is trying to show the singularity of the Dalit condition in India, but I wanted to that the book should present an equally sympathetic gaze onto the Adivasi condition,
Mhm,
that
mhm,
both should be balanced. And you could see the violence that has been done within the Brahminical caste order to both
mhm,
groups, such that
mhm,
they have become re-engineered against each other, in the state framework.
mhm,
So balance sometimes, that kind of question of like, how do you balance the the needs of the people represented? How are you
mhm,
equally sympathetic to that portrayal? That, I guess, that is, I wanted to add to the
mhm.
epistemic justice kind of question. And in
Yeah.
fact, I would love any critical feedback from Adivasi scholars, actually.
Mhm,
I've
mhm,
been in contact with and conversation with Dalit scholars, but
mhm.
it would be actually good to get pushback from Adivasi scholars. And,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, I think it's linked with the epistemic justice is linked with the idea of or a problem of human dignity.
yeah,
And
yeah,
many times dignity is being violated, and researchers do that a lot.
yeah.
And I have seen also people after publishing books and all, they never go back to those people and even ever raise their voice. So these are all actually the issues of of commitment and all. But when it comes to publishing, I think there also it kind of keeps replicating. We keep reproducing the same idea that how, for example, the kind of argument that we make, that are we bringing their voice, or is it just for the sake of making an argument? That's what goes in academia. Now I have seen through my experiences with these top sociology journals in the US. I have, and I think, because we are now just entering in academia, so we get to see this. There are so basic or sometimes even bogus argument are being made with flowery language. And you have seen that all. So how in that context we as sometimes as a reviewer kind of do justice? Um, so I think that's what I would say, that when that's why the idea of peer review is so important, that you take time and making your argument very solid and very grounded. And also, if it is possible, I mean, if you really want to be like true, then one can also go back to the community and say that this is what the argument I'm making
Yeah.
is. But do you agree with that? But that's what scholars don't do. They think that they know better. I think so. One starting
I
point.
did do that because I was so paranoid about
Yeah.
what I was.
Yeah.
I made sure that I checked in. But but it's still, this is the thing, Gaurav, the register that academies has to be translated into, and
Mm-hmm.
versus what they are saying on the ground. They're still, like, even while trying to represent what they are saying, like, that's why I would love more Adivasi pushback and
Mm-hmm.
because um yeah, I mean, it's as we know, there has been a huge constituency secured of Adivasi voters secured by the BJP, and
Mm-hmm.
it would be good to hear from them more about the complex motivations behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Not just any kind of singular narrative, but multiple, you know, narratives coming
Mm-hmm.
together about that. I wanted to say I'm I have another book proposal that I had just written up as a as a as a thing where I was like, I don't think anybody will publish my first book. So I had just written up another book proposal, and I can find that, so I will send that to everyone so that they can see the breakdown and the this question and the
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I think, Pinky, you responded to Shikha's question about book proposal. I don't know, Gaurav, if you also have something to share, like a book proposal that, or somebody else's that can be shared with folks, that would be great. The other question is, this is Sailu K from Telangana and doing PhD at TIS, Mumbai. Thank you so much for organizing this talk. It's really helpful. I would like to know if there's any platform, WhatsApp or Telegram group to be connected with you all. So yeah, Bharat just responded to that. Um, is there, I mean, while folks are thinking of more questions, I just wanted to ask you if you, because this is the third workshop, like we've had other two workshops that have talked about the audience and finding the right press. I think what would also be really helpful if you can talk about the actual doing of the proposal in terms of, like, how do you think about chapters, or even this thinking about, okay, the book is a commodity. What are the sorts of decisions that you took in terms of designing your chapters, with that sort of understanding? And I think many of the folks here, I'm assuming, are Dalit people who've been written about to death, and people who've served as other people's raw data for millennia. And so what kinds of skills can Savarna scholars share with them to also expand the space or build power? Anything you can share that would be helpful.
if Gaurav, if you don't mind, I wanted to say something.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing is this: the main problem of the academy is this, and how it reproduces elitism, Brahmanism, whiteness, is because theory building is dominated by the elite, the empiricism, the empirical offering, as you're saying, the communities have suffered the violence, they have offered those stories, but who gets to build theory and how remains a kind of monopoly, right? And I really think, Bharat, if we are able to organize um, actually some theory focused feedback for proposals where we say, this is your empirical material, these are some theoretical frameworks that seem like it would be helpful for you, and how to make that language sort of infuse that language in your proposal. Doing that directed work, understanding that theory is the space of this kind of reproduction of uh, much of what we are saying is the worst of the academy, right? That we
Mm.
need to bring in people into that conversation, which requires a kind of democratization of theory, which Gaurav pointed out, like it's about command over the language, but it's more than that. It's almost presents as a different language. It's like when I came to the University of Chicago from University of Delhi, and I said, oh, they're talking in English, but I don't understand one word of what they're saying. It's like a totally different register, a totally different language. And basically stayed up nights for first 4 years trying to read all the Foucault, the Nietzsche, the everything that people seem to just trot out like that, you know?
Mm.
And I think understanding that theory is the space where the kind of 1% versus the 99% divide is reproduced in the academy. We should democratize theory. And theory, as we know, the best theory was comes out of the organic intellectual, but it's been taken away from the communities who actually like laboring in the
Mm.
fields or doing the hard labor of going through the circumstances and then holding up the stories. And that is really the who gets to then make something a more global framework from those stories is the.
Mm.
Did you want to add to that, Gaurav? Would you agree with that? Or
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think we should have some workshops just around theory,
yeah,
how to link it with your issue or the topic that you're studying.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, because and that comes again, I think it all boils down to writing.
Yes,
Like
yeah,
there is a writing style. I mean, I think it's like I come from JNU and I can tell you that even in universities like JNU, they don't teach you how to write.
yeah,
They're very good in theories, but they don't know how to write. So we always struggle with we actually learn on our own by following the hard way
yeah.
many times, as you were saying, so rejection after rejection with the journals and all. So then finally you learn that that's how. But I think now we should help the
Yeah.
younger generation that how can we make these connections with theory.
No,
Mhm.
absolutely. And to that question, when we are talking about the reproduction of Brahmin
Mhm.
domination in knowledge making, how does that happen?
Mhm.
It's because the book, there is a book culture, right? How
Mhm.
can you replicate the same thing in communities which have been kept out of the book culture for so long?
Yeah, yeah. That I was
So
talking about the text thing. Yeah, it's the same thing.
it's the same. So you have the only way to do that is to immerse in the
Yeah.
same book
Yeah,
culture.
yeah, yeah. And
Um,
write more, like,
write more.
without the fear of rejection.
Yeah,
Just keep writing. If you want to send it to someone, send it, but don't expect that it'll accept it. But keep writing and learn every time from that. But
absolutely.
it's like you have to have a passion. Book writing in academia, I think it's just more about passion.
Yeah,
It's a, otherwise people I see, most of the people, they write article for the sake of writing. But I think book demands so much patience, perseverance, and rigor,
yeah,
academic rigor, and
absolutely.
that changes your whole thought process.
Whole thought process.
Yeah.
So I think, like Gaurav is saying, at least I mean, and I with all my privilege, the only way that I could get to my book point was just by reading and
Mm.
writing, going back to the drawing board over again, over and
Mm.
over again. And
Yeah.
if we can do anything to expedite that process
Mhm.
because I also understand that, um, yeah, I'm also very aware of the fact that the same story told by the minority actors may not be received in the same way.
Yeah. True. True. True.
So I'm also aware of that fact. And I want to make sure that we are doing what we can to,
Mm.
because the best work comes out of when
Mm.
the elitism is broken down. So, the question, I think, after rejection, can you send the article in the same journal again? I would not do that.
Mm. Yeah, send to other one. There's so many.
Yeah,
There is endless journal. So send to a fresh one. Yeah.
yeah,
So because you will get a new reviewer.
yeah,
So it's also kind of a hit and miss thing. Sometimes you get a reviewer who understands, and sometimes you get a and sometimes there are reviewers who are just so maybe there are so many dynamics that goes on. I have seen somewhere reviewer who if has nothing to say, he just would say, oh, author should read these things,
mm,
and then again delaying the process. So there are so many kind of things. I have also seen reviewers who would, you can just see through their comments that he has not read this side of literature. You can see through the bibliography when the article comes to review, and I look at the reference or bibliography, the kind of people he has cited, you can see that what kind of literature, what kind of ideology one belongs to. So it's kind of you have to like always balance that. Right? And that's why I think we reading widely is a big help in the thing. And one of the column that when you write proposal, one of the column you have to fill up is about the competitive books in your area.
yeah.
And that also shows again about peer review, that uh, how many people are publishing. And sometime I have noticed sometime our PhD students, they don't want to mention that book. They think that, oh, that's already in the market, the publisher will not be interested. No, I think you have to mention every single book that and or if you are very well into the network, that, oh, that friend is publishing the same book on the same theme. Do mention that, because that's a competitive title and publisher would be happy to look at that book and might help you, suggesting that, oh, you change the title this way. It's more about, again, about marketing, that how you play you another thing you must have noticed, that these days, that because of the marketing thing, sometimes title says something else and the book material is completely different inside.
Mm.
So these are all market strategy, but let the publisher do that work. Our job is to stick to our argument very clearly, and we lay it out clearly and share with our friend that this is my argument. How can we make it better? And sometimes our peer group, they would suggest some very good interesting material, or then look at this angle. So our job is to strengthen our argument, and I think rest of the things, let publisher do their job.
I wanted to say, I think the question about after rejection, sending your article to the same journal, or the question of being rejected by the ed the thing is that once that rejection comes in, they flag it as uh, it's not something they would be interested in, even if
Mm.
you significantly rework it. So
Mhm.
that's why sending it back is not going to change the outcome necessarily. Um, uh, Shaista, had you said something that we didn't address? I think you had asked us to.
No, I think this is great. The proposal that you shared would be very helpful. Thank you so much for that.
I blatantly like asked my friend for her proposal, and then I copied the big headline sections from her, and that's and then just kind of tried to populate. But this is a very standard format that is used, I think, across the board now, so it's not proprietary or anything like that. Uh, yes.
Is
And
there, yes.
some of you, is there anyone in the audience who is already in the process
Yeah.
of writing a book?
Uh, hi,
Uh,
Jebim. I am actually writing book proposal. I just started
mm,
on how this, meritocratic inequalities actually, perpetuates in the medical education, exclusively in the medical education. If we see, like, there are 25 lakh students are writing in India for medical entrance, for medical admission, but whereas there are only 1 lakh medical seats. So students who go for coaching only able to secure medical seat at one hand, and the other hand, students who study in CBSE and all these ICSE syllabus, they're able to secure medical. I mean, not medical admission at greater level, but rather as a higher ranks, compared to the students who study in state syllabus, who study in vernacular medium, right? So I'm trying to understand this. I mean, my book proposal trying to understand how these meritocratic inequalities are, actually sidelining the students from first generation learners, or rather, a rural, and then like how this merit actually, contested question in the medical education. The third, I'm trying to see, like, since there are lack of seats in India, most of the students from the say that among all communities, uh, students who are able to, can secure admission, who are actually having money, can secure admissions in abroad, like, some countries like Philippines, Kazakhstan, China. All, I mean, China has got reduced now because of COVID, and then, students also, flowing to countries like, Ukraine, Russia, and all. I mean, when we see students in abroad, I mean, the lower caste students, especially, the so-called lower economic background students, they cannot either go to abroad, or they cannot either go to coaching center by, paying like 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs of whatever money. And then, they'll be, they'll be having, they'll be having greater ambition to become a doctor, but they will be ended up in studying by PC in their plus two level, and then, joining in the some small paracetamol companies in urban areas. So yeah, this is the idea that even I'm still, like, unable to, fetch how, like, this should proposal should be look like, and then I'm also trying to see how, within the reservation, how only the elite sections within all caste groups, I mean, except tribal students, I mean, tribal community. I mean, there are OBC students, almost 50% of the students who get qualified in medical entrances coming from the, so-called the elite sections, again among the SS as well. So, I mean, this trend cannot be continued or cannot be seen among the tribal students, because still this science education is not so, gone deep among tribals. So that is the second thing. Yeah, I am, like, bringing a lot of ideas into one place. I don't know how far that works, but yeah, I'm thinking of approaching any, all Bahujan scholars maybe in soon.
So did you publish some articles around it already?
Yes, yes. I have
Mhm.
published an article in post. I mean, post. I mean, which you were also reviewed. I heard. So, I mean, the caste discrimination in medical institutions
Okay.
in 5 states in India.
Okay, good, good, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Then what
post-colonial
I got
directions in
from your
education.
this
That's
what you
the
just
same thing.
said, I think you're
Yeah,
talking about one is the rural urban divide,
yeah.
and the second is that how it will manifest in terms of like dropping out the dropouts in the.
No, no, there are no dropouts in medical education. You
Okay.
find only, 5 dropouts, 6 dropouts. We have a data from RTI, where
Mm.
we see that only 10 dropouts in academic year, one academic year. We
Mm.
don't see the greater dropouts, because everybody wants to get into medical education, right? So I don't find
Mm.
any dropout.
Okay.
And
Good.
then,
So I
you
would suggest
sorry.
Vinod also talk to Bharat. Bharat is
Yeah,
he has done his thing on higher education and
yes.
the issue of reservation. For example, he's also working on it, and are you part of the mentoring workshop and all that he does? So maybe that
Uh,
can
uh,
help. Yeah.
I'll be signing up with
Sure.
mentoring.
Sure. Sure.
I
Sure.
I wanted to say, Vinod, actually, this is a very worthy project because, all the kind of conversion of this language of caste into merit, the
Yeah.
conversations with, like Ajanta Subramaniam's book
Yes.
about
Yes.
the IITs, Rennie Thomas's work on like how scientific production and scientists in India kind of talk about their like kind of natural. So how scientific education is such a predominant space of the
Yeah.
conversion of caste into merit and capital. That I think is your
Yeah.
starting point and the bigger grounds, and then you will be able to add some different things to it. Shaista is reminding us that we have 5 minutes left. Um,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say very quickly to Sarbeshwar's question, which is that yes, you do need ethics clearance to conduct research with human subjects, without which the university will not allow you to conduct the. At least that was the case for me.
Hmm.
Sure.
And
Uh,
just
it-
lastly,
it's not about the conduct of the fieldworks like this, but I am talking about the publication. Just like the article publication, the journal asks for the ethical certificate sometimes, but what about the book publication houses? What is their responses about the ethical certificate?
No, they are assuming that you have been vetted multiple times by that point, that you wouldn't get to that point without being that. Having said that, I guess Shaista can speak because some ethical concerns have been broached about books that have come up. But technically, you're supposed to have very strict IRB controls that talk about how you gain access to the site. Do you get consent? Like I had to get a consent from RSS and VHP, written consent. Uh, now that consent is not possible.
oh, thank you so much.
Can
Sorry,
I?
Bharat.
Yeah, last point about the consent, because I also conduct my research as an undercover researcher. So I didn't get the consent from the university where I conducted my fieldwork, but so I had to go through the several kind of rounds of IRB clearance from my university, University of Massachusetts. So, Sarveswar, I mean, unless and until you go through that rigor human subject review process from a university, the publication house, they believe that, okay, you have gone through this whole process and everything is clear, then only you reach to this point. So this is kind of a understood kind of a scenario. Saista, please.
No, thank you. I just had, one question. If either Gaurav or Pinky, you want to talk about what a developmental editor is, and, especially for folks with research funds, what that process might look like.
Yeah, I actually had a developmental editor, but she came on board. And at the very end, after, like I had said, I had finished the manuscript, but I got COVID pre-vaccine days and fell very seriously ill. And the book could not have been finished without her because she did all of the formatting of the references, which was crucial. We cite so much, we bring so much together, and then that work, I mean, it's very acknowledgement. And I thanked her in the acknowledgements. And Gaurav, you're talking about the unacknowledged labor. There, I found through a conversation with her, I found again, I somehow seem to be out of the loop of whatever, but there was people employ development editors from day one. Like I said, there is no genius sitting and laboring by themselves. But I didn't know any of this because nobody had acknowledged and thanked the development editors in their acknowledgements. So I should say this, development editors I've since understood, they won't just format references. I was able to get some $500 from Smith to help with the references and all that. But research, you can get research funds, like Vinod is saying, he has a really important question. If he's struggling to like locate it in literatures or think about things, they're usually development editors are, from my understanding, they're not usually specialists in the field. But sometimes, because in a landscape where such little mentoring is available institutionally, sometimes you have to pay a person to read your writing and say, is it making sense or not? And there, and if those of you who have funds, actually, my dream is that I will be able to carve out some time to do that pro bono for folks such as Vinod. And like, because that kind of big picture help, it's very difficult to get from people. So, and like I was saying, that theory and that zoom out big picture, how to locate yourself, and outline the contours of your project, that gives people the strong starting point from which then later you can, the language correction, the referencing, the whatever, that can all be added. But I think that big starting point, if we can develop some workshops around that, I think that would be very helpful. And I think Nidhi's question about that is that kind of struggling to learn the structure and organization, that also we can do a workshop on that.
Thank you so much. I also want to say to folks, you should Google, because Ideas on Fire, for example, offers like podcasts and other resources for even how to write your book proposal. And they are their statistics is that whatever book proposal they read, you pitch it to the press that you want, and that press accepts it. So there are experts, based on like whatever your field is and the presses. The only thing is they charge $1,000 for a 4-page. So it's I mean this quote unquote third world difference across caste and all of that. It's not accessible to everyone. But I just want to say thank you to Gaurav and Pinky, and again to Bharat for organizing this workshop. I don't know, Bharat, if you want to add anything.
No, thank you so much. Thank you again, Pinky, Gaurav, and Shaista. And certainly, I'm planning to do a research mentoring workshop. What we just talked about, like we can share 2 or 3 ideas, and then we can discuss about theoretical, methodological, and other aspect of the research and publication, which we'll plan soon. And thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
If I can be of any help in the future, please let me know.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Bye.